very excited to be doing a review today of the DC Multiverse Bane figure from McFarlane Toys. Now, this is one of their oversized mega figures. I really love these oversized figures, but I have to be honest, I definitely have mixed feelings when it comes to the DC Multiverse line from McFarlane Toys. There's been certain figures that have been absolutely fantastic, and other ones that have been more than a little disappointing. So it's definitely something of a mixed bag, but let's get started and take a look at this Bane figure. For starters, the packaging is absolutely huge. It's probably far bigger than it needs to be in truth, but this is a nice big square box, so it feels very, very chunky. In terms of the design, of course, we know what to expect from DC Multiverse. There's not really an awful lot in this design. It's basically black borders and not a lot else, but this works fine when you've got a fantastic window display like this, and of course we can see Bane there. Behind him is the blue collage of different comic book images from across the years, and this contrast of bright against dark really helps the figure pop in the packaging. So this looks fantastic on display. If we take a look at the side panel, this is a huge thick side panel that we can see. Of course, it is the standard branding, so as I said, it's just basically a name. A bit of a waste of space in my opinion. It would have been great to have had a fantastic comic book image here, but it wasn't meant to be. When we flip the packaging over, we do have this fantastic image here. I think this looks really, really good. This is really dynamic. I love stuff like this. This looks great. There's very little in the way of text. It's all image, and again, this looks fantastic on display. So yeah, this is fantastic. Now, I freely admit I was hugely anticipating the release of this figure, so much so I saved him for Christmas, and I'm really glad I did because he looks amazing. I think the sculpting on this figure is pretty much pitch perfect. I've always longed for a comic book accurate version of Bane in my toy collection, and very often the toys we get tend to fall into two categories: the monstrously oversized and exaggerated forms, or those that just seem a little bit weedy and just not quite right. Here the proportions look pitch perfect, so already this is off to a great start. I think this head sculpt is really nicely done. Of course, it's much smaller than the rest of the body, as it should be. The colours, the paint apps are really nicely done, and of course we have these fantastic pipes coming out of his head and into the tank at the back. I really love the body sculpt here. I think this is all brand new pieces. I don't think there's anything recycled here as far as I know, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic. We can see lots of sinews and muscles and veins popping out there. I think his overall harness looks really good, and again we have a number of different paint washes and different colours here to give it a bit of texture and a bit of depth, which is good news because there's not an awful lot of colour to this character. On his back we see that tank there filled with venom, and we can see those bright luminous tubes of green which look fantastic. Again, they contrast so nicely against the skin tone they've chosen for the paint apps here. This looks fantastic in my opinion. I'm really, really happy with this. And again, we can see one of those wires, those little pipes running all the way from his top of his shoulder there down to his gauntlet glove. This looks fantastic to me. This works really, really well. Adds a little bit of splash of colour to the character, which is great, and just looks really, really fun. Now, speaking of the character's arms, of course, if we look at his hands here, of course, he doesn't come with any swappable hands. These are the only two hands he has, but these are sort of wide open hands, so gripping hands, which I think look pretty good. Interestingly, they didn't give him a fist, because I think that would have been appropriate, so a little bit disappointed we didn't get any swappable hands here, but what we have works really, really well, and of course, we can create some really cool poses with these. Again, the legs and the boots, very nicely sculpted. I like that they've taken the time to paint in the laces in a different colour to help them stand out, give them a bit more texture, which is cool. And I also really appreciate how they put a patch over the joints in the leg there. I think that works really well to kind of cover that and make that look a lot more seamless when we're using the articulations. So really well thought out. So let's see what this bad boy can do then. He does have a ball joint at the neck there, so he can move his head all the way from side to side. He can also move it up and down a little bit. Not a huge range of motion here, to be honest. A little bit disappointing. I thought we could have got a bit more out of this than we can, but hey, beggars can't be choosers. He does have these fantastic massive ball joints in the shoulders, so of course we've got a huge range of motion to really click these arms out, which is fantastic. He's got a single joint at the elbow, so he can bend his lower arm to about 90 degrees as well. There is some articulation in the wrist though, which is great. It's actually on a ball joint, so that hand can rotate all the way around, and it will also hinge forwards and backwards a good deal, which is really good to see. There's another ball joint in the waist, which will allow him to lean from left to right, turn from side to side, and sort of wobble forwards and backwards a little bit as well. But it's just a shame that there wasn't a bit more give here to allow him to bend a bit more more forwards and backwards. It feels a little bit limiting, which is a bit disappointing. He does have ball joints in the hips, however these are very nicely disguised through the use of the rubber pants, which is fantastic. Of course he can kick his legs out to the side, he can actually rotate these a little bit as well from side to side, which is brilliant. He can kick those legs forwards, he can kick them back a little bit, and he's got double joints at the knees which bend all the way back there, which is absolutely fantastic. And then finally, of course, he also has a hinge at the ankle to move forwards and backwards, and a separate toe hinge there as well. Now, the all-important question is, how does he scale against the Batman? Well, here he is standing next to a McFarlane Toys Batman. This is the Batman from the Hush 2-pack that was recently released, and as you can see, this scales pretty much perfectly with my expectations of how these characters should look next to each other. Bane's obviously huge and hulking and towers above Batman, but not too much that it looks silly or over the top. So this works really, really well for me in my opinion. Now, if you're someone who likes to see your Bane a little bit bigger, you could swap him out for a DC Collectibles Batman. In this case, I'm using the Greg Capullo Batman. And as you can see, the size differential has increased massively. So if you're into this look, fantastic, this is probably the one for you. For me personally, this doesn't scale quite accurately to how I envision these characters, but this still is pretty cool, and obviously this is a big figure. This Bane is massive. To see how massive, here he is standing next to the Marvel Select Immortal Hulk, and you get a much better impression of how tall this figure is. Obviously, he's very nearly the same size as the Immortal Hulk, so that should give you a sense of just how big this guy is. So then, in terms of final thoughts, well, you've probably guessed it, I've been quite enthusiastic about this figure. For me, he is a 5-star figure. I think McFarlane Toys absolutely nailed it with this one. This is pretty much pitch perfect. Very difficult for me to find criticisms. If I did, it would be that he doesn't really come with any accessories, I suppose. It would have been nice to have a pair of swappable hands, but that said, what he's got is pretty fantastic. I really, really like this figure. For me, this is now the definitive Bane in my collection, and it has been a long time coming. Love this figure to bits. I think it's really impressive. It's fantastically overbearing. It's perfectly scaled, and it just looks amazing. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.